My name is Almasa Salhovic. I was 8 years old when I survived the genocide in Srebrenica. From my family, my brother was killed in genocide. My other relatives, uncles, both from my mother's and father's side, were killed in genocide, making total 8,372 victims of genocide in Srebrenica who were killed in July 1995. The stories are different, but somehow they're all the same. And I firmly believe that when you remember, it helps you heal, it helps your family heal. Just a few years back, we started talking about that. We started sharing what we remember, what we find most difficult that we experienced. I specifically chose Srebrenica Memorial as the place where I started working 5 years ago because I always wanted to give a piece of me to memorialization, to remember. Every time I talk story about my brother, about my family, I kind of see myself talking the stories of all of us. And for me, it is not possible to imagine myself doing something else.
It didn't happen overnight. It took the events that happened before July 1995, before the final genocide stage. Here in the Memorial Center, we focus to the education, to make people know that something like this happened in the middle of Europe at the end of the 20th century. And actually, that's the signal that this can happen everywhere and to anyone if we don't prevent that.
This is part of our history and my obligation to talk about it, to talk about genocide in Srebrenica. And it's not just my personal story, it's a story of the thousands of people who were here during the siege of this town from 1992 to July 1995 here in Potočari. Here on the main road, there was the checkpoint when they separate men and boys. And later on, many of those people, they were separated here and they were killed.
We escaped from Srebrenica between 1992 and 1995. But in 2003, I decided to come back to Srebrenica and to try to find a way how to live here again. It was not easy. But the first and main reason to come back was the cemetery. You know, most of us who decided to return, we were thinking, okay, we have to stay closer to our dearest, to finish the identification process, to bury them here in the Memorial Center and to have a place to visit them. This is why also the justice was important for us, giving some answers to us and giving us the reason to be able to separate the war criminals from those who did nothing wrong. So that's the way to give us a chance to live together.
Justice is a precondition for reconciliation. And justice because you need to know the truth. You may think about forgiveness, but to forgive, you need to know what happened. If you don't establish what are the facts that happened in a certain situation, it's almost impossible to imagine a real process of reconciliation. We need to know what was done by certain persons if we want not to repeat that. A place like the Srebrenica Memorial is key to preserve the memory of what happened. And we need to make this record accessible to the communities, to the new generations who don't really know what happened and sometimes don't have the whole information. And this will be for the future a good example of how international justice can achieve results and can be useful in places where terrible things happened.
Here you can see we have personal belongings of the victims of genocide in Srebrenica. We are collecting personal items. As you can see here, we have personal items who are found in the mass graves together with the bodies of the victims. You can see these boots. Actually, it belongs to my cousin. He was a 16 years old boy when he was killed during the genocide. His two brothers were killed during the genocide.
You know, when you lose somebody, you deal with the loss. What scares me the most is that people deny it. Generations younger than mine are growing today with that false narrative that genocide did not occur, that the war crime did not occur, that people who were killed here were just soldiers. Here we deal with the facts. We deal with the narrative that we remember. We deal with our own personal stories and experiences of our families. And this is what we're working with.
Genocide denial is, according to the definition, the last phase of the genocide. Unfortunately, here in Bosnia, we can now talk even about the next one. It is glorification of the war criminals. So we are giving a lot of tools to educate themselves what is the situation that possibly can bring us to the atrocity like this. So this is something that we would like young people to learn, how to recognize the first signs, how to react in a time, and how to make maybe faster decisions in the future.